And we're taking it from the general into the specific. And so our next presenter is our Forecast Center Director here at the Bridger-Teton Avalanche Center. So Frank Carus, we're thrilled to have you. And he's going to talk about last year's operations, last year's one fatality, and whatever's on the horizon for this coming year. So glad to have you, Frank. There you go, bud.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for everybody for being here and for your support over the past year. With Executive Director Dwayne Meadows and Mitch Dan and the foundation, we've raised a lot of money this year. Not we, they have. Over $100,000 for old bills. They provide 2/3 of our funding, which is critical, particularly this year. With budgets what they are with the Forest Service. It's a challenging time. We'll announce after a major letter writing campaign from the Winter Wildlife Alliance, our Teton County commissioners and a lot of other individuals, including the foundation, we narrowly, we got an exception over the seasonal hiring freeze. So we put a Band-Aid on it, though. I'm pretty happy where we are this year, but it's important to also realize that next year is a new year, and budgets can be challenging in the government, very political at times. Wildfire seasons get worse and worse, and yeah, our fingers are crossed that we'll be accepted if the situation occurs again next year, but also want to reach out and remind you there's a lot of other pretty important work that the Forest Service does that won't be done to the same level. So trails being cleared, outhouses being emptied, a lot of stuff. So think about those folks. We do important public safety work, but so does other Avalanche Center, or Forest Service resource areas, taking down hazard trees and campgrounds, things like that. So yeah, just a plug for them. So yeah, thanks to Gabrielle's excellent Photoshop skill, we can take a look at our cast of characters this year. You know, among other things, we'll be playing guitar in our ski boots and putting people in the field this year, which is great. 2 people are excluded from this. Cam Galt will now be able to do a detail. Noah was one of 5 people who was able to be hired in this region this year, which was very fortunate for us. And again, just going forward, we're not quite sure what next year will look like. So if you think about it, continue to support your local Avalanche Center. So just wanted to give you some technology updates for what we have going on. In addition to a phone app that we'll be releasing this year, developed by NWAC and the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, we've made some improvements with our developers Carol Peck and Mike DeLang to our website. Right now you can access a lot of the important data that was collected by this Avalanche Center since its inception there, or for a long time anyway. You can still access that through our website. We're funding this legacy site, so you can see that. But going forward, we're ingesting, with Chris Lundy's help and some other developers, Scott Havens, to pull all that old Avalanche forecast data into the same platform for easier access and like comparison and trend views, and leverage the really useful graphical platform that the NAC platform provides. Lots of other things will be released. I can't really think of them all now. This is was fighting wildfires until 2 days ago. So trying to wrap my mind around the season here. But we do have a lot of work that my staff have been doing. They've been knocking it out of the park with our weather station projects. Just a reminder, like we do work in the summertime to do a bunch of things, including weather stations that get blown over by the wind, such as Dead Man there, in the upper right-hand corner. installing a game camera, which maybe folks didn't know about last year, that's in Red Creek in the Snake River Valley. And other upgrades, including being able to install a device that doesn't require us going to climb these weather stations and empty basically antifreeze and alcohol out of the bucket 3 or 4 times a year. It's a kind of a project that takes at least 2 people, and most often you end up wearing at least some portion of that fluid on yourself. So we're going to be stepping away from that and experimenting with some new devices to collect snow data. We also have to maintain our weather stations and repair damage done by the elk and other animals. So along those lines with our telemetry, we've been looking hard regularly and weekly in meetings, but wondering where the gaps in our knowledge are, where the gaps in our telemetry are. One that has become really apparent, particularly as we have learned more about Southeast Idaho and trends there with a number of fatalities. This zone circled in our forecast area, you can see a significant lack of data and snow telemetry. It's pretty sparse, honestly, in that 7,000 square miles anyway, due to scale, but we're doing something about that this year. The staff have identified a good place to put that in the Palisades, which is somewhat accessible on foot, and also representative of what we think is going on in that zone, which appears to be quite different depending on weather trends and snowpack situations, but it's also adjacent to some hot spots of recent avalanche fatalities. So fatalities tend to serve as like a usage pattern. It's like a proxy for a usage pattern, unfortunately. So as you can see, there was quite a lot of fatalities there in the past decade or so. So Baird Wind Station and Baird Snow Station will, fingers crossed, be up and operational this year. And if you're not familiar with that area, it's pretty close to Mosquito Pass and fairly close to Oliver and other places in this part of the range, so should be useful. The other project we're working on right now and have been working on for a couple of years is to re-examine and evaluate our forecast area zone boundaries. As Simon's mentioned in some of his previous talks, these can be dynamic. There's no real reason for those to be the same year after year. And what we're trying to do is basically make our job easier and the reader's job easier to ingest this information that we're putting out each morning. We want to leverage the graphics and the tools that are on the platform. We want to also be realistic about what we can do in the field and how much we can actually cover and ground truth. So there's zones in Yellowstone that have been on the forecast map forever that we've never been to, and I'm pretty sure very few people ever go into. They're wilderness areas, inaccessible by snowmobile. There might be a couple Knowles courses that touch the edge, but up in the Absarokas there, it's no man's land. So we're going to cut some of those areas out. We want to also address some of the requests and kind of what people are identifying as, the community asked for these new zones to be added, such as the big holes, and as we have resources, we want to start doing that. So our process also is not only do we get out in the community and out in the field ourselves, but we also we reflect on our zones. We look at trends and where we can and can't realistically go. We look at heat maps of observations, and that's another proxy of visitation. And also we're going to look at some snowpack models or snowfall models to come up with more reasonable boundaries. This is one of the models we've looked at This happens in February, but we've looked at each winter month for total amount of snowfall, thinking that some of these areas that don't get as much snow, like Togety, tend to have weak layers of snow that are problematic. We also look at weather trends so that, again, we can create patterns or at least understand patterns as they exist and pass that along so we're not overwhelmed with information or overwhelming our users with information. So that's also a part of this process for examining our forecast zones. So user data is a really interesting thing, and there are some folks in the Forest Service working on gathering cell phone pings so that we actually know how many people are in Forest Service system lands and where they go. And it takes like an act of Congress to get that because of the privacy issues that go along with it. But until we're able to access that data, we have a couple of things we can look at. One is snowmobile trails. And you can see that there are no snowmobile trails where all those fatalities occur. So we also need to spend time on the ground to see where people are actually going, because grim trails are not really necessarily an indication of use. If you leave this with anything, please leave knowing that our forecasts are only as good as our observations, and that really is heavily dependent on the public as well as field-going staff. So you can see a heat map here of numbers of observations over time. This happens to be since 2010, didn't include last year. This also has a map of the fatalities that have occurred across the forest, and you can see some pretty distinct and obvious clusters of use, and also engagement with the community through those observations. So you can see north of Moran, north of the Buffalo Valley, basically nothing. South around Montpelier, the southern end, south of Smith Fork, again, pretty much nothing. I know avalanches do occur. I saw a slide path from probably a D3 in the debris last August that was still existing with massive trees and snowfall, but we can't get there. It's over a 2-hour drive just to Smith Fork, and we don't get help from the community there for whatever reason. So that area is also subject to be not forecast anymore, or not included in the forecast zone. So we came up with some options. Our GIS whiz, Noah McCorkle, helped redraw our boundaries so we could put those out in the community. We had a lot of veteran avalanche educators, the guidebook writer, ski patrollers, people who have been involved and skied and ridden snowmobiles a lot more than I have or any of us have over time. And I think the one conclusion we all came to is the one on the right is better than what we have now. This is probably subject to change. There's no perfect solution to drawing a forecast area, but this is our next evolution. This will be our next step this season, or something very similar to that. We're adding a forecast area, so a fourth zone. Due to the financial support of the foundation, we're able to put 2 riders on in the morning, which is huge, really helps with that heavy lift of gathering weather and snowpack data plus writing for forecast zones with a minimum of cut and paste. So along the way, we've also removed, we've changed the lower end of the Salt River range into just a zone that could have general information. More than likely, it's just going to be a zone for observation submission. And you can see we're taunting you a little bit in the big holes to provide observations for us, so hopefully we can start forecasting there someday. We've taken the Gros Ventre, we put the Snow King area and some of the dry zones of the Gros Ventre into its own zone along with the Wyoming range, and shrunk the Teton zone just a little bit, though the primary use areas are largely the same. Again, the northern part of the park there, we just don't get much eyes on. So again, one of the things we acknowledge as we look at this map is that people are always going to extrapolate from our forecast to their zone. You can still do that at your own discretion with caution, but this is where we're at. I got the hook almost here. I was asked to present about the Prater Canyon fatality, David Rice, last year. There's full data on, or full report on our website. I think I just want to point out a couple of highlights here. One is, this is extremely steep terrain. This is 35 to 40 degree terrain. It's a high danger day. Those guys were super familiar with this zone and had a route planned that included staying on this ridge and basically threading the needle through what was a really dangerous time. High danger with persistent weak layers in play, 57 recorded avalanches from the 2nd to the 14th, 20 more avalanches, D2 or larger in the 2 days prior to this, with many more that we didn't observe due to low visibility. Pretty tragic because obviously sticking to the ridge top did not trigger the avalanche, but skiing 30 to 40 feet left, as skier 2 did, as David did trigger a small avalanche 50 feet wide, 1 to 3 feet thick, that then carried him down that gully feature and buried him a meter deep. So complex snowpack last year. So yeah, this is the terrain. It's super steep and tragic incident, and on a high day, these just threading the needle in the terrain, and you know, some other things went into it, assuming that that avalanche, these guys had assumed that the weak layer had been swept out by previous avalanche activity, but with the weak layers in play, those weak layers can just reload. You just add snow again and it's ready to go. It's reprimed. So yeah, these terrain models paint a picture here. They don't always. There's micro-terrain features that elude the digital model. So if you're going to use them with great caution. But in this case, it does point out how steep that terrain actually was. That's it. How'd I do? A little late.
No, he did great and leaves us room for one question for Frank. Who's got one question? I see you down front.
The question I got for you, Frank, is with the Palisades coming down into the Salt River Range and then the other zone adjacent to it, I was wondering how similar those snowpacks are. Yeah, you got Palisades down in Salt River, and then you said that right. I wouldn't say that right. Down into the Wyoming range. How similar are some of those snowpacks compared to each other?
Yeah, so we do see trends where they are similar, like in the higher elevation portions of the Wyoming range can, during some storm cycles, get about as much snow as the Salt River range, but they also have really, and like Ram's Horn to the north, that is one of the zones we're still kind of thinking of tweaking a little bit, but weather patterns trended and snowpack patterns trended pretty differently last year, so we found ourselves writing about the exceptions within the Grays River zone more often than we were writing about similarities. So it puts a lot on the reader to read and understand and parse out, and it also just puts more on the forecaster to speak clearly in a way that people can walk away with actionable information.
Okay, that makes sense. On the Wyoming and Salt River range, is that the differences that you're talking about?
Yeah, primarily.
That snowpack was that different between the two?
Yeah, kind of like, yep, yeah. So Calm Ridge gets just a ton of snow. Dead Man, not quite as much. Still pretty deep. Not always like maritime-ish, depending on storm cycles. So yeah.
Thanks, Frank.
Good question, thanks. Oh, that was it. You can play Stump the Chump with me outside. I love to talk about this stuff.
So thank you to Frank, and then I just want to throw out a real thank you to the rest of our Bridger-Teton Avalanche Center staff who showed up in Gabrielle's graphic. But would you, our team, Gabrielle and Noah and Travis and Alex, whoever's here, would y'all stand up for me, please? Yes. Yes, stand up for me, please. So, Fitz in the back. So, thank you all. Thanks, team, for your really hard work. We really appreciate it.